Tonight, we are going somewhere slow. Not fast, not urgent, not direct. We are going the old way. The way that took days instead of hours. That measured distance, not in miles per minute, but in the steady, patient rhythm of hooves on packed earth, the creak of leather harness, the groan of wooden wheels finding their groove in a well-worn road. We are climbing aboard an 18th-century stagecoach somewhere in England, and we are going to settle in, breathe slowly, and let the miles unspool at the pace they were always meant to. There is no rushing here. There is no hurrying. There is only the road, the motion, the world passing by the window at a gentle 8 miles an hour, and eventually, if you let it, the deep and certain pull of sleep. Before we go any further, if you find these slow, unhurried journeys through history helpful for drifting off, I would be so grateful if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel. I have been working on boring history for sleep, for over a year now, putting real care and research into every script, and I still only have around 160 subscribers. Every single one of you means more than I can say, and every like, every subscription, every comment telling me where you are listening from helps this little channel more than you know. Now, let us go back to the road. Part 1. The evening before. Booking your seat. It begins the night before you travel. Long before you ever hear the coachman's horn or feel the lurch of the carriage finding its first rut, there is the quiet, slightly anxious business of securing your place. You are somewhere in England. Let us say it is the 1770s, or thereabouts. Perhaps a decade earlier, perhaps a decade later. The middle stretch of the 18th century, when the stagecoach has grown from a curiosity into the backbone of British travel. The primary means by which ordinary people move from one place to another, by which letters and newspapers and small parcels make their way across the country, by which merchants conduct their business and families cross the distances that separate them. You are not wealthy enough to own your own carriage. Almost no one is. A private post-chaise with its own horses and postboy is a luxury reserved for the truly prosperous, the kind of people who never need to share a bench with a stranger for 6 hours. You are not one of those people. You are a reasonably comfortable traveller, in a world where a stagecoach journey of 80 or 90 miles is a significant undertaking, planned days or even weeks in advance. The booking office is usually located within or adjoining a coaching inn, one of the great social institutions of Georgian England. The inn you are visiting tonight is a substantial building on the high street of a market town, its frontage broad and respectable, its archway tall enough to admit a fully loaded coach with luggage piled high on the roof. You step inside into a low-ceilinged room that smells of tallow candles and ink, and the particular dry warmth of a room where paperwork and commerce have been conducted for many years. There is a counter, and behind it a clerk, a narrow-faced man in a worn coat who keeps his ledgers with the meticulous care of someone who has learned that a single booking error causes a disproportionate amount of suffering for everyone involved. You tell him where you want to go. He consults the ledger without looking up. There are, it turns out, still seats available. There are always negotiations to be had about which seats. An inside seat, one of the 4 places within the enclosed cabin of the coach, costs considerably more than a place on the roof. The inside fare for a long journey might be 4p or 5p per mile. On a journey of 80 miles, that adds up to a sum that represents several days' wages for a working man. The outside seats on the roof cost roughly half as much, which makes them just barely within reach of a broader range of travellers, though at the cost of exposure to whatever the English sky decides to do that day, which is rarely nothing and frequently a great deal.
You pay for an inside seat. The clerk writes your name in his ledger with a practised hand and tears off a small receipt that you fold and tuck into your coat pocket. You are told the coach departs at 6 in the morning and that passengers are expected to present themselves at the inn yard no later than 5:45. The coach will not wait. This is not a polite suggestion. The stagecoach operates on something approaching a timetable, a novelty in an era when most things happen when they happen, and the coachman and guard have contractual obligations to keep time, particularly if this is a mail coach carrying letters and dispatches, whose punctual delivery is a matter of some official importance. Be there. Be ready. You walk home through the darkening streets with your receipt in your pocket, and you begin to think about what you will need. The journey will take the better part of 2 days, perhaps longer if the weather turns, or a horse goes lame, or the roads in the valley sections have been churned to mud by recent rains. You will need enough clothing to be warm, because even a sealed coach is not a warm place in the English autumn. You will need something to eat, because while there will be stops at coaching inns along the route, the time allowed for eating is brutally short, and the food is not always worth the name. You will need perhaps a small flask of something restorative. You will need patience. You pack your trunk, not a large one, because large trunks cost extra to carry on the roof, and the strapping arrangements are unreliable enough that heavy luggage has been known to bounce free on rough stretches. And you set out what you will wear in the morning, and you try to sleep, which proves difficult. There is a particular kind of pre-journey sleeplessness that has nothing to do with excitement and everything to do with the low-grade anxiety of an undertaking whose 100 small discomforts you can already anticipate but cannot yet precisely imagine. You drift in and out of something like rest. The town is quiet. A dog barks somewhere. The fire in the grate settles lower. Eventually the night deepens enough that something like sleep finally comes, and you do not have nearly enough of it before the knock on your door comes at 5:30 in the morning, and it is time. The world outside is dark. The world outside is cold, and the stagecoach is waiting. Part 2. The coaching inn at dawn. You arrive at the inn yard with your trunk under your arm and your breath fogging in the cold air, and you find that the world, against all reasonable expectation, is already very much awake. There is a particular electricity to a coaching inn in the hour before departure that bears almost no resemblance to any other atmosphere you are likely to encounter in the 18th century.
It is the closest thing this era has to a modern transport hub. Crowded, purposeful, smelling strongly of horses and dung and wood smoke, and the hot metal breath of lanterns. Populated by men and women who are all doing something specific and urgent, who move with the practiced efficiency of people who do this every single morning and have long since stopped finding it remarkable. The inn itself is built around a courtyard, a broad cobbled yard open to the sky, enclosed on all four sides by the building's ranges. The archway through which you entered is just wide enough for a coach to pass, and the stones of the arch are worn smooth at the edges, where generations of wheels and harnesses have brushed them. The yard is lit by lanterns hung at intervals from iron brackets on the walls, and their light falls in warm orange circles on the cobblestones below, leaving the corners in shadow. It is perhaps 5:45 in the morning. The sky above the yard is a deep, unrevealing grey.
The coach itself stands in the middle of the yard, and it is larger than you expected. It is a high vehicle, the body of the coach raised on its springs to a height that requires either the assistance of the footman or a certain nimbleness of limb to enter unaided. The coachman has not yet taken his seat on the elevated box at the front, but you can see him nearby, a broad-shouldered figure in a many-caped greatcoat, speaking with the head ostler in the unhurried tones of two professionals consulting over a shared task. 4 horses stand in the traces, each attended by an ostler who checks the harness with quick, experienced hands. The horses are large, the lead pair lighter and faster, the wheel horses closer to the coach, heavier and steadier, and they shift and blow and stamp on the cobbles with the restless energy of animals who know they are about to work. Around the edges of the yard, the other passengers are beginning to assemble. You recognize them in the way you always recognize fellow travelers, by their coats, their luggage, their expressions of studied calm that cannot quite disguise a measure of private anxiety. A gentleman in a good but not exceptional coat stands near the door to the inn parlour, checking his watch with the regularity of someone who has already checked it 3 times in the last 5 minutes. A woman of middle years, sensibly dressed, sits on a low bench near the archway, with a basket on her lap, and the expression of someone who has done this journey before, and has long since made her peace with its discomforts. A younger man, perhaps 20 years old, stands near the back of the yard, with the particular uncertain energy of someone who has never taken a long coach journey before, and is not sure quite what is expected of him. Inside the inn parlour, the kitchen has been up since before 4. The fire in the range is well established, and the smell of it drifts across the yard. Wood smoke, and something faintly meaty, and bread. Breakfast is available for those who want it, and can eat quickly. Which is to say, it is available, but it must be consumed with purpose. The parlour is a low room with dark beams and mismatched furniture, its walls hung with coaching prints
and a clock that has been running 5 minutes fast since 1748, and is kept that way deliberately because passengers who think they are running late tend to eat faster and complain less. There is porridge, thick and grey and sincere. There is bread, yesterday's, but still perfectly good. There is small beer, which is what most people of the 18th century drink in the morning because the water is unreliable, and the beer is weaker than a modern drinker would expect, more grain water than anything intoxicating. There is, if you are lucky and arrive before the other inside passengers, a bowl of something hot with a spoon in it that the kitchen girl describes as stew, and which, whatever it actually is warm and filling.
You eat quickly. The clock on the wall claims it is 5 minutes to 6, which probably means it is 10 minutes to 6. And either way, the yard outside is reaching a kind of controlled crescendo of final preparations. Trunks are being strapped to the roof, a metal frame or iron rack upon which luggage is piled and secured with ropes and leather straps that inspire only moderate confidence. Smaller bags and parcels go in the boot, the enclosed storage compartment at the rear of the coach. The guard, a compact, watchful man in a red coat that marks him as the keeper of the mail, if this is indeed a mail coach, is checking a sealed leather bag of correspondence with the practiced ceremony of someone who understands that what he is carrying is more valuable, legally speaking, than the passengers themselves. The coachman climbs to his box. This is, in its quiet way, the signal that everything else is over. The ostlers step back from the horses. The yard empties of peripheral figures. The passengers move toward the coach door, and the footman, a young lad in a worn livery coat, holds it open with a hand and a wary expression, ready to take hold of the door if the wind catches it, ready to fold down the step for passengers whose knees are not what they were. Inside the coach smells of leather and dust, and the faint animal warmth of all the people who have sat in these seats before you. It is not unpleasant. It is the smell of a place that has been well used. There are 4 seats, 2 facing forward, 2 facing back, upholstered in worn leather that was once a rich mahogany brown, and has faded to something between that and the colour of old tea. The floor is covered in straw, fresh this morning, though it will not smell fresh for long. The windows have wooden frames set with small panes of glass, and there are leather curtains that can be pulled across for warmth or privacy, though in practice the inside passengers tend to spend the first half hour of any journey in a quiet but pointed negotiation about whether the window should be open or closed. You take your seat. The door closes. The horn sounds. Part 3. The coach itself. Let us stay here a moment, inside the coach, while the final preparations complete themselves outside. Let us take the time that a tired traveller never quite takes to look closely at this remarkable machine that is about to carry you across a significant portion of England. The stagecoach of the mid to late 18th century is not a crude vehicle. It is, in fact, the product of centuries of incremental refinement, of craftsmen in coach-building yards across England, working through problem after problem. How to make the ride less punishing. How to carry more passengers and more luggage without becoming so heavy that 4 horses cannot pull it. How to make the vehicle safe on hills, on wet roads, on the loose gravel of the new turnpike surfaces that are beginning to transform the main routes of England. The coach you are sitting in represents something close to the best thinking of its era. The body of the coach is hung on leather straps called furrow braces, broad, doubled strips of leather that serve as a kind of suspension, absorbing the shocks of the road before they reach the passengers within. In the later part of the century, steel springs begin to supplement and eventually replace the furrow braces on the better coaches, giving a ride that contemporaries describe with something approaching wonder. The body itself is made of seasoned hardwood, ash for the frame with lighter woods for the panels, painted in the colours of the coaching company that operates this route. Many coaches carry names: the High Flyer, the Regulator, the Defiance. These names are not idle boasting. They are a form of advertising, a promise made to the travelling public that this particular coach on this particular route is fast and reliable and will arrive when it says it will.
The windows, which you are now sitting beside, are small by modern standards. A pane of glass that measures perhaps 12 inches by 10 inches, set into a wooden frame that can be slid up or down to adjust the ventilation. The glass is not perfectly flat. It has the slight ripple and variation of hand-blown sheet glass, and if you press your face close to it and look out, the world beyond has a faint, dreamlike quality, as if seen through still water. The window frame rattles in its channel. It will do this for the entire journey. You will not notice it after the first 20 minutes. The ceiling of the interior is low. A man of above average height would need to sit with his head slightly tilted, and it is padded with the same leather as the seats, or at least it was padded. The padding has compressed over years of use into something that is more symbolic than functional. There is a strap, a broad loop of leather attached to the wall beside each seat, which serves the same purpose as a modern grab handle, something to hold when the road turns rough and the coach begins to pitch and sway, and the passengers inside find themselves briefly weightless or crashing against each other's shoulders. You will learn to hold this strap reflexively, without thinking, within the first hour. Above you, on the roof, the outside passengers are arranging themselves. You can hear them, the scrape of boot soles on the painted wood, the low exchange of conversation, someone settling back against the luggage that is piled behind the coachman's box. An outside seat costs half what an inside seat costs, and in fine weather it is arguably the better deal. The views are unobstructed, the air is fresh, and there is something undeniably exhilarating about sitting on top of a moving coach with the English countryside spread out below you like a living map. In bad weather, however, an outside seat is a study in endurance. The rain falls directly on you. The wind, unbroken by any windshield, is relentless. In winter, the cold is a physical force.
Passengers on the outside have been known to arrive at their destination stiff as boards, unable to descend without assistance, their fingers too numb to manage the simplest fastenings of their coats.
At the rear of the coach, up on his seat above the boot, sits the guard. He is the most important person on this vehicle, in the strictest official sense. He is the servant of the post office, or of the coaching company, and his responsibilities are both broader and more demanding than the coachman's. He keeps the timepiece. He carries the schedule and the waybill. He blows the yard of tin horn at every toll gate to announce the coach's approach, a sound that carries extraordinary distances on still mornings, and that will become so familiar to you over the next 2 days that you will hear it in your sleep for weeks afterward. He is armed. A blunderbuss in the seat beside him, a brace of pistols at his belt. The threat of highway robbery is real enough in this era to make the guard's armory a practical necessity rather than mere pageantry. And then there is the coachman. He sits on the box at the front, raised above the coach body, with a view of the road ahead and a commanding position over the 4 horses, whose reins he holds in both hands, with the economy of movement of a man who has driven this route hundreds of times and knows every pothole, every blind bend, every section of road where the surface is liable to be treacherous after rain. He is almost certainly wearing multiple coats. The great-coated style of the era allows for 3 or 4 layers, each cape of the garment offering a degree of protection against the weather. His hat is broad-brimmed. He drives with his elbows low and his wrists flexible, feeling through the reins for the state of the horses, for the drag of the road, for anything that needs adjusting before it becomes a problem. He does not look behind him. He is not, strictly speaking, concerned with the passengers. He is concerned with the road and the horses and the time. This is your world now for the next 2 days. These 4 walls, these 6 other passengers, including the ones on the roof, this steady rocking motion, this road ahead. The horn sounds a second time. The horses lean into the traces. The coach begins to move. Part 4. The social world inside the coach. There are 4 of you inside the coach, squeezed into a space that was designed for 4, and therefore fits 4 in the technical sense that 4 bodies can be made to occupy it simultaneously, though not in any sense that involves actual comfort or the preservation of personal space. This is, as historians of the period have noted, one of the most radical social experiments of the 18th century, even if no one at the time framed it in quite those terms. The stagecoach interior forces together, for hours or days at a stretch, people who would not ordinarily share a room, let alone a bench. Class, gender, profession, temperament, the coach ignores all of them. You paid for an inside seat, you got an inside seat. So did everyone else in here. Look around you. On the forward-facing seat beside you sits a man of perhaps 55,
whose clothes speak of solid commercial prosperity, without quite achieving the polish of genuine gentility. His coat is good wool, well cut but not new. His boots are clean. He has a leather satchel on his lap that he has not put down since he got in, and he holds it with the particular vigilance of a man who is carrying something he considers important. He is, you have already guessed, a merchant of some kind. The kind of man who makes this journey several times a year in connection with business, who knows the roads and the inns and the likely condition of the coach, and who has therefore brought his own food, a linen-wrapped parcel that sits beside the satchel and smells faintly of cold meat and bread.
Opposite you, on the backward-facing seat, the less desirable of the two facing benches, since some passengers find the reverse direction nauseating on a rough road, sit two people. One is a woman of perhaps 40, dressed in a practical travelling dress of dark wool, her hair neatly pinned under a close cap of white linen. She has a large knitted shawl around her shoulders that she has already begun to rearrange for warmth, though the coach has barely cleared the inn-yard, and she carries a small bag on her lap, from which she has produced, with the unhurried confidence of an experienced traveller, a piece of knitting in a pale grey wool. She does not look up when anyone speaks. She is not unfriendly. She has simply done this enough times to understand that the most efficient use of the hours of a long coach journey is to make significant progress on whatever handwork one has brought. The fourth passenger is a young man, very young, perhaps 19 or 20, who is sitting with the rigid, self-conscious posture of someone making a great effort to appear more at ease than he actually is. He is well dressed, somewhat overdressed for a coach journey, in a coat that suggests he or his family had this trip in mind as a social occasion and dressed accordingly. His hands are folded in his lap. He looks out the window. He will spend the first several hours of this journey trying very hard not to impinge on anyone, sitting as still as possible, and gradually discovering that the coach has its own ideas about stillness, and that the proper response to the motion is to yield to it rather than resist. Outside, on the roof, you can hear between 3 and 5 more passengers, though the exact number is negotiable. The outside of a stagecoach has a tendency to acquire additional passengers at each stop, sometimes beyond what is strictly sanctioned, because the coachman earns a portion of his income from tips, and therefore has a certain professional flexibility about headcount that the coaching company officially deplores and practically tolerates. There are regulations in theory. No more than 6 outside passengers is a common standard. These regulations are, in the 18th century, more observed in the breach than in the letter. And here is the thing about sharing a coach for 2 days. For the first hour, everyone is polite and careful. The conversation, when it happens at all, is the careful, neutral conversation of strangers who know they will be spending significant time in each other's company and have not yet determined how much they will come to like or dislike one another. Weather, the state of the roads, how long it took the last time someone made this journey, whether the new turnpike surface on the southern section is as improved as the newspapers have claimed. These are safe topics.
weeks. They require no commitment.
The merchant. His name, you discover over the first hour, is something like Hartley, a Birmingham factor. Turns out to be a reliable and not unpleasant source of information about the route. He has made this journey 11 times in the last 4 years and has strong views about which coaching inns serve decent food and which serve bad food, with the confidence of establishments that have a captive customer base and know it. He recommends the Bell at the first stop. He advises strongly against the mutton at the Crown and Sceptre, which appears under a variety of misleading names in each of its seasonal presentations, but is always, at its core, the same mutton. He imparts this information with the gravity of a man sharing hard-won intelligence, and it is received as such. The woman with the knitting, Mrs. Alderton, as she eventually introduces herself, with the brisk efficiency of someone who knows a name is necessary but a biography is not, is travelling to visit a sister whose husband is ill. She knits through this disclosure without slowing down. The needles click with a steady rhythm that, after a while, begins to feel like part of the coach's own soundscape, another percussion in the layered music of the journey.
The young man, who turns out to be called Edward and is travelling to London for the first time in his life, for reasons he is too embarrassed to specify, and which turn out, eventually, to involve an apprenticeship in a counting house, spends the first part of the journey in careful silence, and then, somewhere around the second hour, makes a tentative remark about the landscape outside the window that turns out to be exactly the right kind of remark, and from that point on, he relaxes by small degrees, like a plant straightening in good light. This is the Stagecoach, a world in miniature. Strangers made temporarily intimate by circumstance, thrown together by the simple mechanics of a booking ledger and a road, learning the private rhythms of one another's breathing and hunger and fatigue over the course of hours and days, and then dispersing at journey's end, never to meet again. Part 5. Departure. The first miles. The horn sounds, the wheels begin to turn, and the world changes. It happens slowly at first. The coach gathers its momentum with the same stately deliberateness of a large animal rising from rest, the horses finding their footing on the cobblestones, the harness tightening and settling, the coachman's voice issuing the first low, confident command. You can feel the stones of the yard beneath the wheels, each one distinct, a brief separate percussion, and then the archway passes over you, and the inn recedes, and you are in the street, and the street is the town, and the town is beginning to fall away. The streets of the market town in the early morning are alive in the way that streets are alive in the hours before the working day has fully committed itself. The baker has been up for hours. His light is yellow in the window, and the smell of bread is so strong and warm as you pass that even the merchant, who has been ostentatiously unimpressed by everything so far, looks up from his satchel. A carter is loading barrels from a cellar door.
each barrel rolled with a practised boom onto the planks of his wagon. A dog sits in the middle of the road with the philosophical composure of a dog who knows a coach will go around him, and it does. A woman in a heavy shawl throws water from a bucket across a doorstep, and the water catches the early light and scatters like glass. Then the street widens, the buildings thin, the last house falls behind, and the road ahead opens into something broader and lighter, and you understand, for the first time this morning, that you are actually going somewhere. The town does not disappear all at once. There are outlying cottages, a mill by a stream, a small church with a lich gate standing open to a meadow. But these are already passing, already becoming the past, and the road is taking on its proper character, a broad corridor of packed gravel and earth, edged by hedgerows whose branches reach overhead on either side, forming a tunnel of bare winter wood through which the morning light filters in pale, thin shafts.
The coach's motion is not smooth. Let that be said clearly and without apology. It is not smooth, and it was never smooth, and no amount of leather strapping or steel spring could make it entirely smooth, because the roads of 18th-century England, for all the improvements wrought by the turnpike trusts who maintain the main routes, are not the flat, predictable surfaces of a later age. They are compressed earth and gravel, and in some places broken stone, laid by men with tools and hands, and without the benefit of modern engineering, and they carry within them every frost and flood and heavily laden cart of the previous winter as a kind of record, a geological stratigraphy of consequence. The coach rocks. It pitches slightly on corners. On rough sections it shudders through the floor and into the seat and up through your back in a way that is not painful exactly, but which asks something of your body, a willingness to accept the motion rather than resist it, to let the joints absorb what the road gives, to not hold yourself rigid against the movement, because rigidity on a coach leads to aching muscles and a general sensation of having been lightly beaten with a soft mallet over an extended period. You learn to soften. It takes perhaps 20 minutes. The young man, Edward, learns it faster than you expected. He was not, apparently, as tense as he appeared, or the motion of the coach teaches him something he did not know about relaxation. The merchant learned it years ago, and is already consulting papers from his satchel with the practised ease of someone who has written letters on a moving coach and barely registered the motion. Mrs. Alderton's knitting needles continue their metronomic conversation with each other. The guard's horn sounds at the first toll gate, a bright carrying note that rings out ahead of the coach and brings the toll-keeper to his door. The toll gate is a simple wooden bar across the road, painted white so as to be visible at night, hung with a counterweight so that it rises smoothly when the toll-keeper releases the latch. He is a small man, in a coat that has seen many weathers, his face the particular weathered colour of a man who spends his days outdoors in all seasons. He does not need to speak. The coachman tosses the toll coins down to him in a well-practised throw,
The gate rises, the coach passes through without slowing, and the gate descends behind you with a soft thud.
This is the great system of the turnpike trusts, the network of private bodies, each empowered by an Act of Parliament, that have taken on the responsibility of maintaining stretches of road in exchange for the right to levy tolls on those who use them. It is an imperfect system, frequently complained about, occasionally corrupt, subject to the kind of grudging local controversy that attaches itself to any arrangement in which money changes hands. And yet it works. The roads it maintains are, on the whole, demonstrably better than the roads it replaced. Coaches that once took 12 hours to cover 40 miles now cover the same distance in 6. The world, measured in the currency of time and distance, has grown smaller. The first miles unspool beneath the wheels. The hedgerows open here and there to reveal fields, large open fields where the land has been enclosed, smaller irregular patches where the older common field system still applies. There are sheep on a hillside, grey-white against the grass, moving with the slow, unhurried drift of animals who have not received any news that would require them to hurry. There is a farmhouse at the end of a lane, its chimney putting out a slow thread of smoke that bends in the morning wind and dissolves. There is a river, visible only briefly, a flash of grey-silver between the willows, and then it is gone, and the road climbs, and the horses slow, and the coachman's voice comes down from the box in a long, easy encouragement, and the weight of the coach is felt in the way the suspension compresses on the uphill, and then the hill is crested, and the road descends into a shallow valley, and the horses find their pace again, and the horn sounds twice as you pass through a small village, and the morning deepens around you into something that is almost, if you let it, peaceful. Part 6. The Roads of England. The road is the great fact of this journey. Everything else, the coach, the passengers, the inns, the schedule, exists in relation to the road, depends upon it, is shaped and constrained by it. And the road of 18th-century England is a thing worth understanding if you want to understand what it felt like to make this journey.
For most of English history, the maintenance of roads was the responsibility of the parishes through which they ran. Each parish was required, by ancient law, to maintain the roads within its boundaries, and each householder within the parish was required to contribute a certain number of days of labour per year to that maintenance. This system, even when it functioned as intended, which was by no means always, produced roads of wildly variable quality, since a wealthy parish on a main route might keep its roads in excellent repair, while its neighbour, poorer or less organised, let them deteriorate into a state that the more acidic contemporary commentators described in terms that make their contempt for the arrangement entirely plain. Arthur Young, the agricultural writer, travelled England extensively in the 1760s and 1770s, and left behind descriptions of roads that read, from a modern perspective, like dispatches from a disaster zone.
He writes of roads so deeply rutted that a coach wheel dropped into a rut could not be extracted without the combined effort of every passenger on the outside and several bystanders from the nearest village. He writes of mud so deep and of such character that it constituted, in his view, a genuine hazard to life. He writes of the road from London to Norwich as being, in its worst sections, little better than a ploughed field, and of the road through parts of Lancashire as being so bad that no rational person could explain how any wheeled vehicle managed to use it at all.
But by the time you are making this journey, the middle decades of the 18th century, let us say, or somewhat later, the turnpike revolution is well underway, and the road beneath your wheels, if it is a main route between two significant towns, is probably a good deal better than Arthur Young's nightmares. The turnpike trusts operating under Acts of Parliament have been steadily taking over the main roads of England since the early part of the century, and their work is visible. The road surface is maintained with a layer of broken stone, properly compacted, that gives the wheels something solid to grip. The drainage ditches on either side are reasonably clear. The gradients, where possible, have been managed to reduce the steepest climbs. Bridges have been built or improved where fords once made the road impassable in wet weather. It is not perfect. No road in this era is perfect, but it is functional, and it keeps functioning even in conditions that would have defeated the roads of a generation earlier.
The toll gates are the price of all this maintenance, and travellers have strong opinions about them. Each time you pass through one, and on a long journey you will pass through many, sometimes at intervals of only a few miles, the coach must slow at least to a walk, the toll must be collected, and a few seconds or minutes are added to the journey. The cumulative effect of 20 or 30 toll gates over the course of a long day is not trivial. Some coaches, particularly the mail coaches of the latter part of the century, acquire the privilege of exemption from tolls. The guard's horn announces their approach, the gate must be opened without delay, and the coach passes through without stopping. A brief assertion of governmental priority that the ordinary stagecoach cannot claim. But today, on this particular road, at this particular hour, the surface is good enough, and the weather has been dry enough that the wheels are cutting through the gravel with a clean, purposeful sound. The sort of sound that makes you think the road and the wheels have reached an accommodation, a mutually acceptable arrangement that allows for steady progress. The horses are fresh. They were changed at the last stage stop, remember, only 12 miles back, and they are pulling with the energetic compliance of horses who have not yet had reason to tire. The road ahead is straight enough to see the hedge lines converging at a distant point, a perspective exercise in green and grey that recedes in a way that is oddly restful to watch, the distance closing so slowly that you can barely perceive the movement.
The texture of the road changes as you travel. A good section gives way to a rougher stretch, where the surface has not been regraded recently, and the wheels find the old ruts left by heavy wagons in an earlier wet spell, now dried into a permanent corrugation. The coach pitches more sharply, the passengers sway.
A soft impact travels through the floor. Then the rough section ends, as if the road has made a decision, and the surface smooths again, and the motion settles back into the long, rolling rhythm that has been lulling you half into dreams for the last quarter hour.
Because here is what you discover about the motion of a stagecoach on a good road in the second or third hour of a journey, when the novelty has worn off and the body has adapted, and there is nothing immediately demanding of your attention, and the landscape has settled into the slow, unchanging patience of the English countryside in autumn. It is almost impossible to stay fully awake. The rhythm is too steady. The warmth of the enclosed cabin, body heat of 4 passengers, plus whatever the sun is managing through those small rippled glass windows, is just sufficient to take the edge off the cold without making it uncomfortable. The sound is constant and even. The hooves, the wheels, the creak of the harness, the faint percussion of the guard seat somewhere behind and above, and constant even sounds are the enemies of wakefulness. Your body, deprived of a full night's sleep by an early departure and the previous night's travel anxiety, begins to negotiate with you. It does not ask for much, just a closing of the eyes for a moment, just a giving in to the rock and sway, just a surrender to the motion, which will, after all, carry you where you are going, whether you are awake to watch it or not. Part 7. The sound and rhythm of the road. Let us be quiet for a moment. Let the script do less, and the sounds do more. Let us simply listen to what this journey sounds like. The hooves first. 4 horses in harness produce a sound that is not quite what you would expect if your only experience of horses is a single horse at a walk. 4 horses create a complex percussion, the lead pair slightly ahead of the wheel horses, and so their footfalls land a fraction earlier, giving the whole a rolling, overlapping quality, a sound that advances in waves rather than in simple 4/4 time. The front feet strike first, the hind feet follow, and if the road surface is right and the pace is even, it settles into something almost musical, not quite a rhythm, but almost one, always just approaching regularity without quite achieving it, like rain on a roof. The wheels provide the continuous bass note beneath the hooves. They do not thump individually. At this speed, on this surface, they create a low, steady roar. Not loud, not aggressive, but constant and deep. The sound of many small impacts happening so quickly that they blur into a single sustained vibration that comes up through the floor and the seat and into the bones of your back and legs. It is not a harsh vibration. It is more like the feeling of a held note, a cello's low sustained string, felt as much as heard. The harness speaks its own language. The traces, the long leather straps that connect the horses to the coach, creak under tension, a slow, rhythmic sound, like the sound of a sailing ship's rigging in a steady breeze.
the collars around the horses' necks, the rings and swivels of the tug irons, the chains and leather of the pole pieces that connect the wheel horses directly to the coach body. All of this hardware moves and flexes and talks to itself in a quiet, metallic and leathery voice that is continuous and reassuring, the voice of a system doing what it was designed to do. The coach body itself contributes. The wooden frame, old and well settled, has a vocabulary of creaks and small complaints that it delivers at irregular intervals, usually when the road drops away on one side and the weight shifts, or when a wheel finds a depression and the body twists slightly on its springs. These are not alarming sounds. They are the sounds of a structure accommodating stress, the sound of wood that has been doing this for years and knows how to do it without breaking. The leather curtains at the windows shift and settle. The straps that hold the luggage on the roof occasionally issue a dull, thumping reminder of their existence when the road turns rough. Somewhere above you, one of the outside passengers has a bag that knocks softly against the roof with a metronome regularity that is not quite the same as the coach's own rhythm, and is therefore slightly hypnotic in its difference.
The guard's horn sounds at intervals. Each toll gate, each sharp bend where the road crosses a bridge or enters a village, each stretch of road where the forward visibility is limited and it is useful to announce the coach's approach to anything that might be approaching from the other direction. The horn carries far. On a still morning, it can be heard half a mile or more ahead, and you can sometimes hear, or imagine you hear, the distant response of a farmer pulling his cart off the road, or the cry of a toll-keeper hurrying to his gate. The sound of the horn is bright and clean, and foreign to the rest of the journey's soundscape. It cuts through the bass of the wheels and the murmur of the harness like a beam of light through a shuttered room. Then it fades, and the road sounds close back in around it. Inside the coach, the sounds are softer. The knitting needles, the merchant's occasional rustle of papers, the young man's slow, controlled breathing that has moved over the last hour from the slightly rapid pace of someone who was trying not to show nervousness to the longer, deeper rhythm of someone who has given up on nervousness because the journey is simply too long to maintain it. Somewhere around the second hour, Mrs. Alderton's needles slow slightly and then stop, and you realize she has put the knitting down and closed her eyes, and that her head, cushioned against the leather of the seat back, is nodding very slightly in time with the motion of the coach.
Outside, the wind. This is not the wind of an open field. You are, for much of the journey, enclosed within the high hedgerows that line the turnpike road on both sides, and the wind here is channeled, narrowed, arriving in the intermittent gusts of a confined space rather than the broad, sweeping currents of open ground. You hear it at the window frame, a faint whistle, a low murmur that changes pitch as the speed of the coach changes. When the road climbs and the horses slow, the wind noise drops. When the road descends and the coach gathers pace, it rises, and there is a moment at the crest of each hill where the hedgerows fall back and the sound opens up,
and you are briefly in the weather of the whole sky. And then the road dips and the hedges close again, and the world contracts to this enclosed, mobile room. You are warm enough. The cold of the early morning, which was significant when you walked across the yard of the inn, has been replaced by the accumulated warmth of 4 bodies in an enclosed space. Your coat is good. Your feet are on the straw. The leather seats have absorbed some of the warmth of the morning. Your eyes, which were sharp and clear when the coach departed, have taken on that particular quality of early journey tiredness, not the heavy exhaustion of late night, but the soft, muzzy quality of a body that got up too early for something that has now, pleasingly, stopped requiring its full alertness.
The road rocks you. The road rocks you, the miles go past in a way that is felt more than seen, each one deposited quietly behind you as the horses keep their steady pace, and the sound of the journey, the hooves, the wheels, the creak of wood and leather and iron, the wind at the window, the faint music of the guard's horn at each gate, wraps around you like a blanket, and the landscape outside the rippled glass grows soft at its edges, and your thoughts, which were purposeful earlier, begin to drift. Part 8. The first stage stop. You have been travelling for perhaps 2 hours, possibly 2.5, when the motion changes. The horses slow, not abruptly, but perceptibly, as if someone has given a very gentle suggestion that speed is less important now than it was. The coachman's voice comes down from the box, a word or two in the particular tone of a man speaking to horses rather than to people. The road sound shifts as the surface changes. Cobblestones now, the distinct individual percussion of a paved yard or street. And there is a sudden density to the world outside the window. Buildings, close on both sides. People. Noise. You have arrived at the first stage. The yard of the coaching inn explodes into competent, practised activity the moment the coach wheels cross its threshold. It is as if the entire inn has been coiled in readiness for this moment and releases the instant you arrive. 3 ostlers move to the horses before the coach has fully stopped, each man going directly to the animal he is responsible for, without any consultation or apparent coordination. The wheel horses are unfastened from the traces. The lead pair are led forward and away. From the stables at the side of the yard, 4 fresh horses are already being led out by a 4th ostler. Animals that have been groomed and harnessed and waiting for exactly this moment, walking with the alert, purposeful energy of horses that have not yet done any work today and are ready. The process of changing the horses takes less time than you would believe possible. 5 minutes is the standard. On the best routes, on the best days, with the best organised yards, it can be done in 3. Every movement is choreographed by years of repetition. Each buckle, each trace, each collar fitting going on in the same order, by the same hands, with the same practised speed, day after day after day, until it has ceased to be a task and become a reflex.
The horses are swapped in the time it takes you to climb down from the coach, stretch your back, take 3 deep breaths of cold air, and establish the location of the necessary facilities.
The stop is short. This must be understood clearly because it shapes everything about the stage stop experience. You have, depending on the schedule and the mood of the guard, perhaps 15 minutes. On some routes and some schedules you have 20. On a mail coach, where the schedule is enforced with almost military rigour, you may have as little as 10, and the guard is already looking at his timepiece when you step down. Time enough to use the facilities, to drink something hot if the kitchen is fast and you are willing to accept it in a cup you have to hand back immediately, to eat something cold and portable that you have brought yourself, to briefly allow your legs the luxury of being in a position that is not sitting down. The inn at this first stage stop is smaller than the departure inn. It does not need to be large. It does not accommodate overnight guests to any great degree, being primarily a horse-changing station on a well-serviced route. But it is not shabby. The yard is clean, the ostlers are competent, the kitchen has broth on the fire and a pot of small beer and a plate of cold meat and bread. The tap room is low and warm and already occupied by 2 other travellers from a coach that passed through perhaps an hour earlier and is now continuing its journey somewhere beyond.
You stand in the yard, as most of the passengers do, stretching in the manner of people who need very much to stretch, but are also aware of being observed by strangers, and are therefore stretching with a degree of restraint. The outside passengers have climbed down from the roof and are standing in a loose group, their faces wind-burned and their coats damp with morning air. They have the look, these outside travellers, of people who are engaged in a considerably more physical version of the same journey. They are colder, more alert, their eyes clearer than the inside passengers, whose warmth has made them drowsy. They drink their beer with the efficiency of people who know exactly how long they have. The merchant eats from his parcel without comment or embarrassment. Mrs. Alderton accepts a cup of broth from the girl who has appeared with a tray and holds it in both hands, warming them, not drinking it immediately. The young man, Edward, looks around the yard with the expression of someone absorbing information he will later describe to other people. And then, too soon, and yet somehow also right on schedule, the guard's horn sounds once, a single, clear, businesslike note, and everyone who has descended begins the process of returning. The door is held, the step is folded out, the outside passengers climb back up with varying degrees of gracefulness. The horses, new and fresh, and not yet familiar with the people on this particular coach, stand in the traces with the coiled readiness of animals about to demonstrate what they are for. You climb back in. The door closes. The yard falls away. The road takes you again. Part 9. The English countryside unfolds. There is a particular quality to the English countryside in the middle of the 18th century that has to do not just with the land itself, but with the relationship between the land and the people who live on it.
it and work it, a relationship that is in the midst of profound and permanent change. The landscape through your window is not the wild landscape of an earlier era, nor is it the industrialized landscape of the century that follows. It is something in between, a countryside that is intensely organized, deeply humanized, but not yet mechanized, not yet turned over to the logic of machines and fossil fuels and the annihilation of distance. Every field has a shape that reflects a human decision. Every hedge marks a boundary that was negotiated and planted. Every lane that branches off the main road leads somewhere specific, to a farm, to a mill, to a village, to a house. And those places are connected to each other and to the road you are travelling in ways that are older than memory and younger than the present moment simultaneously. The enclosure movement is underway. You can see its effects if you know how to read the landscape, and many people of this era do. The old system of open common fields, broad strip-like acres held in common by the village community, farmed in rotation, is being replaced piece by piece, parish by parish, through acts of parliament that allow landowners to consolidate holdings and enclose them within hedges and fences. The new fields are larger. They are bounded by straight hawthorn hedges that have been planted recently enough that the hawthorns are still relatively young, their growth not yet the dense, impenetrable wall it will become in 50 years. Between the new fields and the old, you can see the difference in the field shapes and sizes. The older sections with their irregular, organically arrived-at boundaries, the newer sections with their deliberate geometry. The villages you pass through are small, mostly. A church, a green, a public house or inn, a cluster of houses and cottages in various states of repair. Some villages have markets, the presence of a market cross, a broad central space, the remains of stalls, and these are the ones that feel most alive, most connected to the commercial world the coach is part of. Others are quieter, more turned inward, the houses presenting their blank sides to the road as if the road is an intrusion. The children who appear at the roadside, and there are always children at the roadside, watch the coach with expressions that range from bored familiarity to genuine excitement, depending on how often a coach passes through. In villages on the main routes, a coach is unremarkable. In more isolated places, it is an event. The farms are visible from the road in ways that the farms of a later era will not be. There are no large farm buildings with corrugated metal roofs and concrete yards. There are instead timber-framed barns, roofed in thatch or dark tile, their walls darkened with age, set close to the farmhouse in a cluster that reflects the intimacy of the farming life, the proximity of animals and humans that characterizes the pre-industrial agricultural world. You can smell the farms as you pass them, the deep vegetable earth smell of a working farmyard, hay and dung, and the particular mustiness of stored grain, all overlaid with wood smoke from the farmhouse fire. The trees are worth noticing. The hedgerows are full of them. Oak, elm, ash, the great trees of the English countryside that have been allowed to grow tall from hedgerow root
because they provide timber without taking up agricultural land. They are part of the managed landscape, these trees, even though they look wild. The oaks especially. Some of them are clearly old enough to have been ancient when the current king was born. Massive, slow-growing organisms that have witnessed 2 centuries of the same road and the same pasture and the same progression of the seasons. Their bare branches, at this time of year, trace against the sky in the complex calligraphy of deciduous trees in late autumn or winter. Not sad, not empty, but patient, resting, holding their form with a kind of minimal dignity.
The rivers appear and disappear. England in the 18th century is a land of rivers. Not the great navigable rivers of the major routes, but the small ones, the named and unnamed tributaries and streams that thread through every valley, powering mills, watering meadows, marking parish boundaries, providing fish and waterfowl to those who live beside them. You cross them on bridges, some of stone, old and solid, their arches worn smooth at the waterline, their parapets fitted with posts to protect the coach wheels from going over the edge on narrow crossings, some of timber, more recent, their planks drumming under the wheels in a sound that is briefly different from the road sound, and then over. The water beneath them is dark in the autumn light, moving purposefully, carrying leaves, reflecting the grey sky without enthusiasm. Ahead, always, the road. It is a straight road, or it almost is, straight enough to let you see 3/4 of a mile ahead on a clear section, the hedges framing the perspective as cleanly as the walls of a corridor. At the far end of this straight, the road bends to the right, around a copse of elms, and beyond the bend you cannot see. But you have been on this road for long enough now that the unknowing of what lies beyond each bend has stopped being suspenseful and started being comfortable. There is always more road. The road always continues. The bend ahead is just another section of the same sustained, patient journey. And through all of this, the horses keep their pace. 8 miles an hour on a good road, 6 on a rough one. They are not racing. No one is racing. This is the speed at which England is traversed in this era by those who can afford to traverse it at all. A steady, walking to trotting pace, a speed at which you can see everything clearly, can take in the details of the farmstead, read the sign above the inn, watch the blacksmith smoke, catch the eye of the woman in the cottage doorway who looks up from her work for a moment as the coach passes. A speed at which the world is not a blur, a speed at which you are present in it. Part 10. Your fellow travellers, stories and silence. By the middle of the day, the social geography of the coach interior has rearranged itself into something more honest than what it was at the start. The formality of the first hours, the careful conversation, the polite restraint, the performance of not impinging, has given way to the more genuine arrangement that emerges when people have been in a small moving room together long enough that pretense becomes more effort than it is worth. Not intimacy, exactly, not friendship, but a kind of provisional honesty,
The honesty of people who are too tired and too close together to maintain the full architecture of social distance.
The merchant, Hartley, has put away his papers and is now talking. This has surprised you slightly. He did not strike you in the first hour as a man with an appetite for conversation. His attention to his satchel and his papers suggested someone who valued the journey as working time, who would resent the encroachment of other people's chattering on his productivity. But it turns out that Hartley is a man who talks when talked to, and the young man Edward, finding his courage somewhere around the third hour, asked a question about Birmingham, Hartley's city, his subject, his pride, and opened something. Birmingham, it transpires, is extraordinary. At least Hartley thinks so, and he makes the case with the evangelical fervour of a man who has watched a city transform itself within a single lifetime. In 1720, Birmingham was a large town of perhaps 15,000 souls. By the 1770s, it is approaching 50,000, a swelling, clanging, smoking place of metalworking and invention and commerce, producing buttons and buckles and blades and guns and 100 other objects of metal and craft that are shipped across the country and across the world. It is a city of artisans, independent craftsmen working in small workshops, each master of a particular trade, connected to the others in a web of supply and demand and skill that has made the whole enormously productive without the benefit of any single large enterprise or factory. It is, Hartley says, with a satisfaction that is only partly commercial, the workshop of the world, or will be. Mrs. Alderton listens to this with the politely attentive expression of someone who is hearing things she already knows and is being kind enough not to say so. She is from Birmingham, or near it. She has an aunt there, or had one, and she allows Hartley his enthusiasm without contradiction. When he finishes, she asks about the roads on the eastern approach to the city, whether the section that was under repair last spring has been finished, and Hartley reports on this with the factual pleasure of a man who is delighted to have been asked. Edward, the young man, asks the questions that young men ask when they are about to encounter a world they know only from other people's descriptions. What is London like? Is it as large as people say? Are the streets indeed as dangerous as the newspapers suggest? Is it true that the Thames floods the lower streets in a wet winter? He asks these questions with a directness that you suspect he will lose quickly once he actually arrives in the city and learns to be more careful with his enthusiasms. But right now, it is entirely appealing.
Hartley answers the London questions with the authority of someone who visits regularly and dislikes it with great specificity. The streets, yes, are busy beyond any reasonable expectation. The smell, in summer, is not something he would recommend. The crowds are such that on certain thoroughfares at certain hours it is genuinely difficult to move at a speed greater than a slow walk. The press of bodies and vehicles and animals
house being what it is. And yet, there is, he concedes, something about London that is not like any other place. A particular energy, a sense that everything that matters in England eventually passes through this one point, that the pulse of the nation is felt most strongly here. He does not like London. He goes there 6 times a year. He would not miss it. Mrs. Alderton has her own London. She talks about it differently, not as a commercial entity or a problem of navigation, but as a place where certain people she loves live their lives, a place of concerts and galleries and walks along the embankment on clear autumn mornings when the light on the river is extraordinary, a place of excellent drapers and indifferent milliners, and one specific pastry shop near St. Paul's, whose almond cakes she has thought about, she admits with a small smile, approximately twice a week for the past several months.
And then, for a long stretch of the afternoon, the conversation stops, without anyone having decided to stop it. It stops the way conversations stop when the journey has been long enough, and the warmth has been consistent enough, and the rhythm has been absorbed deeply enough that talking becomes more effort than the available energy can sustain. Hartley closes his eyes. Mrs. Alderton's knitting, which she has picked up again, slows and then stills in her lap. Edward leans his head against the leather of the seat back and looks out the window at the passing countryside, with eyes that are increasingly soft at their edges. The coach rocks on. The miles go by. The conversation will resume at the next stop, or it will not. Either way, the road doesn't mind. Part 11. The Highwaymen. There is a shadow over the road in this era, and it is the shape of a man on a horse.
Highwayman. The word carries, even now, a kind of romantic charge. The dark horse, the black coat, the cocked hat, the levelled pistol. They exist in popular culture as figures of dangerous glamour. Men who chose freedom over safety and the road over the counting house. Who took what they wanted at gunpoint and occasionally had the grace, in the stories at least, to do it with style. Claude Duval, who robbed coaches on the road to London in the reign of Charles II, was said to invite ladies to dance with him by the roadside before relieving their companions of their valuables. Dick Turpin rides Black Bess through the ballads and chapbooks of the era, heading always northward at supernatural speed, always just ahead of the law. These are the highwaymen of legend. They are more attractive than the truth. The truth is that highway robbery is a crime of opportunity, of desperation, and of cold practical economics. The men who hold up coaches on the roads of 18th-century England are not, for the most part, glamorous renegades with a code of honour. They are men who have found that the combination of a horse, a pistol, and a road where coaches must slow for hills or gates offers a reliable, if dangerous, method of extracting money from people who have it. Some are former soldiers, demobilized after wars with their skills intact,
and their employment prospects poor. Some are tradesmen or servants who slid into debt and found the road more accessible than the workhouse. Some are habitual criminals who have tried other methods and found this one the most productive.
The coaches they target are not the mail coaches, if they can help it. The mail coach guard is armed and dangerous, and the reward for robbing a mail coach is significantly higher than the reward for robbing an ordinary stage, meaning that every constable and justice of the peace in the county will be actively interested in your capture. The ordinary stagecoach is safer prey. Its guard may be armed, but the law's interest in his robbery is somewhat less intense, and the passengers, crowded inside, can be efficiently persuaded to surrender their purses and watches through the simple application of a pistol at the window. The government, for its part, takes highway robbery seriously enough to offer significant rewards. £40, a substantial sum in an era when a working man might earn £20 in a year, is offered for the arrest of anyone caught robbing a stagecoach. For robbing the mail, the reward rises to £200, and if the robbery takes place within 5 miles of London, it reaches £300. These rewards attract informers as efficiently as they attract constables, and the highwayman's life expectancy in the harsh actuarial logic of the era is rarely more than a few years after he begins. In the toll houses along the route, toll keepers are issued with speaking trumpets, brass or tin megaphones through which they can shout warnings to approaching coaches if a highwayman has been seen in the area. This is a practical measure and a limited one. The network is only as good as the speed of human communication, and a highwayman operating by night or moving quickly between stretches of road can stay ahead of word of his activities for days. But here is what the stories do not tell you, and what the reality of travelling this road confirms. Most journeys pass without incident. The romantic image of every coach being held up every few miles is wildly exaggerated. Highwaymen are rare enough that their exploits are news, and news, by definition, is the exception rather than the rule. The ordinary journey, your journey, this journey, the one that is carrying you across England at 8 miles an hour as the afternoon lengthens, is not, in all probability, going to involve a pistol at the window. It is going to involve exactly what it has involved so far: the road, the horses, the motion, the company of strangers. And yet the possibility is there, lodged at the back of the mind like a splinter you cannot quite locate. In the evenings, approaching areas of heath or common land, Hounslow Heath outside London, Gad's Hill in Kent, Finchley Common to the north, the conversation in the coach tends to quieten in a particular way. Not silence exactly, but a watchfulness, a periodic checking of the window, the merchant's satchel moved to a less visible position, Mrs. Alderton's small cash purse shifted deeper into her bag.
The guard knows this. The coachman knows this. In these areas, the pace tends to increase slightly. Not a gallop, nothing dramatic, but a briskning, a shortening of the gap between one section and the next, a willingness to
push the horses a little harder through the miles where the road crosses open ground with no building in sight, and the hedges are low, and the horseman approaching from the side would be visible for half a mile in good light, but would have the cover of darkness at night. At Hounslow Heath, as you pass through, the guard has his blunderbuss across his knees. You see this when the coach slows for a rough section and you look back through the tiny rear window. He is alert. He is watching the ground on either side with the contained attention of a professional who has done this many times and hopes to never need to do more than this. The open ground passes. The road bends back into a corridor of hedges. The guard's posture relaxes by a degree that you would not notice if you were not watching. Nothing happens. Nothing in all likelihood will happen. You breathe out. Part 12. Afternoon light and the long middle miles. There is a quality to the middle hours of a long journey that is not quite the same as the beginning or the end. A suspension, a long, patient middle distance in which the destination is no longer imaginary but is not yet real, in which the miles behind you are too many to count back to the beginning, and the miles ahead are too many to count forward to the end. You are simply in the journey. That is all. The journey is all there is.
The light in the afternoon of an English autumn is not the light of morning or of evening. It is a particular kind of settled, horizontal light that comes from a sun that is already declining toward the southwest, not setting yet, but beginning its intent, laying itself more broadly across the land at a lower angle, turning the hedgerow grass gold on one side and leaving the other in a shadow that is more purple than grey. The shadows of the elm trees reach across the fields in long, specific lines. The river, when you see it again, carries this light differently, not the grey reflection of the morning, but a warmer, more amber shimmer that moves and breaks and reconstitutes itself with the current. The passengers in the coach have settled into the long middle of the day. Hartley has fallen asleep, properly, comprehensively asleep, his chin dropped to the impressive lapels of his coat, his breathing slow and regular, his satchel still held in both hands, even in unconsciousness, with the fidelity of a man who does not fully trust the world, even when he has left it temporarily. Mrs. Alderton is awake, but barely. She is in that particular middle state that experienced travellers achieve, a kind of attentive rest, eyes open but soft, present enough to notice anything that requires noticing, absent enough to be getting genuine recovery from the hours of sitting and swaying and conversation. The knitting has been put away. Edward is watching the countryside with the rapt attention of someone who is very far from home for the first time, processing everything, every farmhouse, every church spire, every wagon pulled off the road to let the coach pass, with the same intense and careful regard. He does not know it yet, but he is forming a memory,
the particular colour of the afternoon light on a particular field, near a particular village, on a particular road, in a particular autumn of the 1770s, is going in somewhere deep and durable, in the way that first-journey landscapes always do, stored in the same part of the mind that keeps the first face you ever loved, the first piece of music that ever moved you. He will not be able to summon it deliberately in later years. It will come to him instead, unbidden, when he is old and the world has changed beyond recognition, in a moment of tiredness or a particular quality of light in a different season, and he will feel something whose source he cannot immediately identify.
You pass through a market town that is, by the standards of the afternoon, surprisingly lively. It is market day, or was. The stalls on the market square are being dismantled with the pragmatic efficiency of traders who have been here since early morning and are ready to go home, piling their unsold stock back into wagons with a speed that suggests they have done this every week for years, and will do it every week for years more. The square is a mess of straw and mud, and the evidence of a day's commerce. Scattered vegetables, broken packing material, the smell of animals that were here this morning and have now been sold and led away. The coach slows to navigate the narrow street that bisects the square, and the outside passengers above you have to duck under the sign of an inn that hangs too low over the road, a fact they were presumably warned about by the coachman, though not apparently quite early enough. Past the market town, the road opens again, a stretch of managed parkland on the right, the outer edge of some substantial estate, its trees planted in the deliberate, elegant groupings of landscape design, the land given over to the business of looking beautiful, its labour invisible but evident in the smoothness of the grass, the perfection of the lake glimpsed between oaks. The gate of the estate is closed, the gatekeeper's lodge neat and still. The family is not at home, or is at home and invisible, behind those long windows in that large and silent house at the end of the beach avenue that you can see for just a moment before the road turns.
The horses have changed 3 times now. Each fresh team brings the same initial energy, the same forward press in the first mile, the same gradual settling into the pace that the coachman requires. You have stopped noticing the changes. You have stopped noticing with any real attention the toll gates or the villages or the other coaches encountered coming the other way, whose passengers lean out of their windows to look at you with the same curiosity with which you look at them. You have settled into the journey. This is where you live now, this moving room, this swaying, rocking, creaking world of 4 passengers and worn leather and straw and the steady percussion of the road. Your eyes have been closing and opening for the past half hour with increasing irregularity. The intervals between the closing and the opening are getting longer. This is not an emergency. This is not anything other than what it is. The afternoon light is warm on the near side of your face, the side facing the window. The motion of the coach is exactly and precisely the motion that the body, when denied sleep, eventually agrees to treat as equivalent.
The sounds are the same sounds they have been for hours, and will be for hours more. Their sameness no longer alerting, but comforting, the background of a world that is continuous and safe. Sleep is not a decision, it is an arrival, and it is arriving now. Part 13. Night falls on the road. You wake, and you do not immediately know where you are.
This is not unusual. This is what happens when you sleep on a moving coach. The world of the coach interior has not changed. Same four walls, same leather, same straw on the floor. But something outside has changed fundamentally. The light through the window is different. Not the afternoon gold you remember. Something darker, more muted. The blue-grey of a fading sky, and then the amber of something else. You are approaching the end of the light. The sun has dropped behind the hills to the southwest, leaving behind it the usual English reluctance. Not a clean sunset, but a gradual, indefinite darkening. A slow withdrawal of the day's colour, as if the sky is uncertain about committing to night, and is taking as long as possible about it. The fields outside are still visible, but as outlines now rather than details. The hedgerows are darkening masses on either side. The road ahead, visible in the gaps where the coach lamps illuminate it, is a pale ribbon that disappears into dark. The lamps. This is something worth attending to. The stagecoach that travels by night, and many do, particularly the mail coaches that operate on strict overnight schedules, carries its own illumination in the form of 2 oil lamps, one on each side of the coach body, near the front. These lamps burn whale oil, which gives a warm, slightly yellowish light, and a faint smell that is not unpleasant, something organic, marine, ancient. The lamplight falls on the road immediately ahead of the horses, and on the verge to either side, creating a moving pool of visibility in the surrounding dark, a world approximately 30 feet in diameter, in which the horses and the road and the immediate hedgerow are lit with the warm, imprecise intimacy of candlelight, and everything beyond that circle is the dark of an 18th-century night, without electric illumination, without artificial light of any kind, except what someone has specifically provided. To people accustomed to modern nights, with their orange glow of distant cities and the perpetual background luminosity of the inhabited world, the darkness of the countryside at night in the 18th century is almost incomprehensible in its completeness. On a cloudy night, away from any town, the darkness is absolute. You cannot see your hand in front of your face. The world beyond the lamp circle is not dim, not shadowy. It is nothing. It is the original darkness that preceded human habitation, and it presses against the small, bright world of the coach with a physical solidity that makes the lamp seem smaller rather than larger. The horses can see better in this than you can. This is partly why the coachman trusts them. They know the road in ways that go beyond visual recognition.
their feet finding the firm centre even when his eyes cannot. But the coachman is not relying on the horse's night vision alone. He knows this road. He has driven it dozens of times, knows where it narrows, where it crosses a bridge with insufficient clearance, where the surface turns unpredictable after rain. He drives by feel and memory and the accumulated expertise of a professional. And the result, even in the dark, is a pace that does not drop as dramatically as you might expect. The horses are slowed, yes, but the coach continues. Inside, the lamplight filtering through the windows creates a strange intimacy. The faces of the other passengers are partially lit, partially in shadow. The merchant, who woke when you woke, and has been looking out the window with the expression of a man recalibrating to the fact that it is dark. Mrs. Alderton, who appears to have slept through the entire afternoon and the arrival of night, and is only now stirring, pulling her shawl more closely around her, with the automatic gesture of someone responding to cold without fully waking. Edward, who is awake and slightly wide-eyed, processing the darkness outside with the respect that the English countryside at night in the 18th century deserves.
The sounds of the night journey are not the same as the sounds of the day. The hoofbeats are louder, or rather, they seem louder. The darkness concentrates the sound, removes the visual competition, makes the ear work harder for the information the eye is no longer providing. You hear things you did not hear in daylight. An owl somewhere in the trees to the right, its call a long, clear assertion into the dark. Something, a pheasant perhaps, startled from the verge, erupting from the hedge with a sudden violent clattering that makes the horses twitch and the coachman issue a quiet, steadying sound. The wind in the elms, a long, continuous sigh that moves through the canopy overhead and comes down to the road as a cooling of the air through the window crack. The guard's horn sounds more often at night. At every toll gate, now lit by a single lantern that the tollkeeper holds up to the approaching coach, the horn announces the arrival, and the gate swings open, and the lamplight spills briefly into the tollkeeper's face, a pale oval in the dark, eyes narrowed against the light, hand raised in the same gesture he makes a dozen times a night. And then the gate is behind, and the darkness closes back in, and the road goes on. You are tired again. The sleep of the afternoon was not the sleep of the night. It was the light, grateful doze of a body catching up on what was owed, not the deep restoration of proper night sleep. Now, in the genuine dark, in the warmth of the coach interior, with the lamplight outside making the world small and the road ahead a narrow strip of possibility, the tiredness is of a different quality, deeper, more insistent, the kind that does not negotiate. The hours between the last stage stop and the overnight inn are the slowest hours of the journey. They are not unpleasant. There is something about the night coach that is actually more peaceful
on the day, the reduced visual information and the darkness having the effect of simplifying the experience to its essential elements: the warmth, the motion, the sound, the company of other people who are also tired and also quiet, but they are slow. The miles between one place and another feel longer in the dark, because there is less to mark their passing, until, ahead of the horses, in the middle of the otherwise unbroken darkness, a light appears, and then another, the clustered warm lights of a town, the destination of tonight. Part 14. The Overnight Inn. The coaching inn at night is a different animal entirely from the coaching inn at dawn.
At dawn, it is all purposefulness and forward motion. The departures, the horse changes, the business-like commerce of people going somewhere. At night, it settles into a different register. The coaching inn at night is a place of arrival, of temporary belonging, of the particular gratitude that tired people feel when they are given warmth and food and a flat surface to lie on after hours of sitting upright on a moving vehicle. The inn you are pulling into tonight is substantial. It would need to be. This is a major overnight stop on a well-travelled route, and the inn's prosperity depends on its ability to accommodate the simultaneous arrival of several coaches, with their multiple horses, their passengers, their mailboxes, their luggage, and their collective hunger and tiredness. The yard is large enough to take 2 coaches side by side with room to spare. The archway is lit by 2 lanterns on iron brackets, one on each side, and their light turns the archway into a frame, warm, orange, beckoning. The yard, at this hour, is active, but not frantic. 2 other coaches are already here. One arrived an hour ago, its passengers inside at supper. One has just departed, its yard marks still fresh in the gravel. The ostlers who come to the horses are the night shift, slightly different men, or the same men at the end of a long day, their movements efficient, but with a slight heaviness that corresponds to the hour. The horses are taken away, the luggage is unstrapped from the roof, the passengers file out of both coaches and in through the low door into the warmth. The inn interior at night is the experience of stepping from cold darkness into a different world. The main room, the parlour, or the tap room, or whatever name this establishment gives its communal space, is loud with fire and candlelight and the voices of people who have been travelling all day and are now briefly at rest. There are travellers from 2 or 3 coaches at various stages of their journeys, some departing at midnight, some resuming tomorrow morning, some spending 2 nights here before continuing. There are local people as well, men from the town who use the inn as a gathering place in the evenings, who are only marginally interested in the arriving travellers, but who contribute to the noise and warmth of the room with the easy familiarity of regulars. The fire is the centre of the room. It is not a fireplace in the modern sense. It is a large open hearth
set against the chimney breast, a proper working fire, with logs in it that are thick as a man's thigh, burning with the slow, steady confidence of a fire that has been kept going all day and is under no immediate pressure. The heat radiates from it into the room in waves, reaching the far walls with enough force to be felt even across the length of the room. The light it gives is complex and moving, amber and orange, and occasionally, when a log shifts and a spark rises, briefly bright gold.
You are shown to a table. Supper is available. In the better coaching inns, supper is an actual meal. Something hot, something recently cooked, served with bread and small beer, and whatever the kitchen has been preparing for the evening's travellers. Roast joint, perhaps, a thick soup, a pie whose contents are not exactly guaranteed, but are probably acceptable. In the less good coaching inns, supper is whatever was left from dinner, plus yesterday's bread, and an attitude of mild resentment toward guests who arrive after 10. This inn, you will be relieved to discover, is one of the better ones. The food, when it comes, is not subtle. It is not meant to be. It is meant to fill the specific hole that a day of travelling has made in a person, and it does this job with conviction. The soup is thick and hot, and tastes of leeks and something more substantial, a base of bones probably, reduced to a warmth that spreads through you from your chest outward. The bread is yesterday's, but adequate. There is butter in a small clay pot that has been warmed slightly by proximity to the kitchen fire. There is a piece of boiled beef that would not disgrace a middling London chophouse, and which tastes in this moment like the best thing you have eaten in weeks.
Hartley eats with the absent efficiency of a man fueling himself for the next section. Mrs. Alderton eats slowly and gratefully, talking with the landlord's wife, a capable woman in a good apron, whose management of the chaos of a large coaching inn makes her, in practical terms, one of the most competent people you have encountered on this journey. Edward eats everything on his plate, and looks around the room with the particular energy of someone who has been tired and is now, with food inside him, less tired and more interested. He is looking at the other travellers with the same attention he gave the countryside earlier, absorbing. The beds. This is where things get complicated. In the 18th century, sharing a bed at an inn is not unusual. It is, in fact, standard at busy coaching inns, where the demand for beds reliably exceeds the supply. You will likely share a room with at least one other person, possibly two, depending on the size of the room and the number of travellers. The practice is so common that it requires no apology and little negotiation. The innkeeper simply assigns beds as they become available, and the travellers accept the arrangement with the pragmatic tolerance of people who understand that it is a bed, and that a bed, however shared, is significantly better than the other options available. The room itself is not large. 2 beds, rope-strung wooden frames, each topped with a straw mattress and a feather mattress above that, the combination giving a surface that is simultaneously lumpy and yielding in a way that takes a little getting used to. The sheets are linen, and they are clean. The smell of dried lavender suggests a recent washing,
and the blanket on top is wool, heavy and slightly scratchy in the way that only a certain kind of very old wool blanket is scratchy. There is a candle on the table beside the bed, a window with a wooden shutter latched against the night, and outside the shutter the sounds of the inn-yard settling into its overnight quiet, the occasional movement of horses, the distant voice of the ostler, the last coach of the evening rumbling out through the archway. You blow out the candle. The room goes dark. The inn sounds come to you through the walls and the shutter. The fire settling in the tap room below. A burst of laughter from somewhere. A dog barking once in the yard. The wind in the sign above the door. These are unfamiliar sounds in an unfamiliar room, and yet there is nothing alarming in any of them. They are the sounds of a place that is doing what it is supposed to do, sheltering people from the night, keeping the world outside at a manageable distance.
The straw mattress whispers when you move. The feather mattress settles. The blanket holds its warmth. The pillow smells faintly of dried flowers and a previous guest's hair, and the particular dryness of linen that has been folded and stored and unfolded and used many times, a smell that is institutional and yet not unwelcoming, the smell of a place that has sheltered many people before you and will shelter many after. Sleep, in this context, does not require coaxing. It comes with the unhurried certainty of something that has been waiting all day and is now finally permitted. It comes with the darkness and the warmth and the settled sounds and the knowledge that there is nowhere else to be, no decision to make, nothing to do until the knock on the door at 5:30 tomorrow morning. Outside, the road goes on. The coaches that are travelling through the night, the mail coaches, their schedules exempt from the comfort of overnight stopping, are somewhere on that road in the dark, their lamps cutting small bright holes in the countryside, their passengers wrapped in coats and blankets, their guards holding their horns and their timepieces, the miles accumulating in the dark with the same quiet persistence they accumulate in daylight. But you are not on those coaches tonight. Tonight you are in this room, with this blanket, with this sound of the inn settling around you like a hand placed gently on your shoulder, and the sleep that comes is good and deep and unhurried, and the hours between this moment and the knock on the door tomorrow morning are hours of no particular consequence except their quality, which is the quality of rest, the quality of the genuine return to the place you are always travelling toward, regardless of the road. Part 15. Before dawn. The road resumes. The knock on the door comes at 5:30, exactly as promised, without sympathy. You have been asleep for perhaps 6 hours. This is more than you got the night before, and it is less than your body would choose if it were given a choice, which it is not.
The knock is firm. The knocker's voice, a girl's voice or a boy's, ageless with early morning, clear and unapologetic. 5:30. Coach at 6. Breakfast in the parlour. The room is cold. The candle was blown out last night and not relit, and the room has cooled in the night to something close to the temperature outside, which is the temperature of early November in England, which is persuasive in its argument for remaining horizontal under the wool blanket and conducting all future business from that position. You do not do this. You get up, because the coach at 6 is not a suggestion, and the road does not wait for anyone who has decided they would like a little more sleep.
The window shutter lets in the first grey of early morning when you push it open. Not light yet, not truly, but the beginning of the withdrawal of dark. The eastern sky showing a very faint, very cold brightness above the roofline of the inn across the yard. The yard below is already working. The ostlers are up, the horses are being led out. Steam rises from the horses' backs in the cold air, from their breath, from the hot water in the bucket that someone is carrying toward the stable with one hand. The cobblestones are wet. It rained in the night, a soft English rain that you slept through entirely, and the lamplight catches the moisture on the stones and turns them briefly into something that looks like polished metal. Breakfast in the parlour is porridge, bread, beer, and the remnants of last night's fire rebuilt into something serviceable. The fire's warmth reaches you before you are fully awake, and there is a moment, standing with your hands around a cup of something hot, feeling the warmth move through your palms into your fingers, watching the fire recalibrate itself for the morning, when the world is simple and immediate and sufficient. Just this warmth, just this cup, just this fire. That is enough. That is, for this moment, everything.
The other passengers arrive in various states of wakefulness. Hartley is already awake, has been for 20 minutes, is standing near the fire with the proprietorial air of someone who has taken the best position in the room and intends to hold it until boarding is unavoidable. Mrs. Alderton appears with the clean, alert look of a woman who has slept well and who is entirely prepared for the resumption of the journey, her bag on her arm, her shawl already arranged, her expression composed. Edward arrives last, his coat half-buttoned, his hair showing the evidence of a night spent in imperfect horizontal, eating bread in a way that suggests breakfast is doing its work. Outside, the coach is being readied. The new team of horses, this is a different establishment than last night's, with its own string of stage horses maintained and managed by the innkeeper in a commercial arrangement with the coaching company, stands in the traces in the cold morning air, with the patient composure of horses who are used to this hour and have no particular feelings about it. The guard is already on his seat, his horn across his knees, his timepiece in his hand.
The town that the inn sits in is barely awake. A baker, yes, already. A chimney putting out smoke. But the streets are empty of the foot traffic that will fill them in 2 hours, and the coach moving through them makes a sound that carries further in the early morning quiet,
the hoofbeats and the wheel noise bouncing back from the closed fronts of the houses with a clarity they don't have when the streets are full of people. You feel like the first movers in a world that is not yet prepared for motion. The guards on the overnight mail coaches must feel this always, this quality of moving through a sleeping world, of being the only thing on the road at 3 or 4 in the morning, the lamplight your only company. But gradually, as the town falls behind and the road opens again into the countryside, the world becomes tentatively daytime. The eastern sky lightens by degrees, the pale grey becoming something slightly warmer, slightly more definite. The hills on the horizon acquiring outline, the hedgerows acquiring specificity. By the time you have been on the road for an hour, it is clearly, officially morning. The sun not yet risen, but its intention unmistakable. The sky ahead a wash of cold pearl and very faint amber. The first birds beginning in the hedgerows. Not the full chorus of spring or summer, but the November morning's modest offering. A robin's thin claim on the territory. A rook's argument with something at the far edge of a field.
The frost. There was frost last night, and it is still on the world this morning, on the grass of the verges, white and precise, each blade individually coated, on the leaves caught in the hedge, turned silver and stiff, on the puddles in the road, where the water has frozen into thin, dark discs that shatter under the wheels with a sound like breaking crockery, cleanly and without drama. The horses breathe great white clouds into the cold air. The coachman's multiple coats are dusted with frost on the outer layer. The outside passengers are wrapped in whatever they could find, coats and scarves, and in one case what appears to be an entire horse blanket that was presumably borrowed or stolen from the last stable, and which its wearer is defending with a pre-emptive hostility that suggests she is aware it is irregular, but intends to keep it anyway. Inside the coach, the morning cold is felt even through the closed windows. The accumulated warmth of yesterday is gone. The leather seats are cold to the touch until the passengers have sat in them for a while and donated their body heat. The straw on the floor has a slightly damp quality from the night. Mrs. Alderton rearranges her shawl and produces from somewhere in the depths of her bag a second pair of gloves that she puts on with the satisfaction of someone who packed well. But the cold is clean. There is nothing oppressive about it. It is the cold of a world that has been rinsed overnight by rain and sealed by frost, and is now presenting itself in its morning form, sharp, clear, every detail distinct, the air carrying smells that the warmth of the afternoon mutes, cold grass, wet wood, the mineral faint of frost-covered stone, the distant smoke of a farmhouse chimney just getting started. The world at this hour, in this season, on this road, is very specific, very present, very real in the way that cold and morning and the particular
particular quality of low November light make the world real. The coach rocks. The horses keep their steady pace. The miles begin again, picked up from where they were left last night, with the same undemonstrative consistency. The road resuming its offering of hedgerow and field and copse and occasional village, as if it had been waiting patiently through the dark for the coaches to come back. Part 16. The World Beyond the Window Revisited. By the second day, you see the countryside differently. The first day was novelty. Every church steeple, every farmhouse, every village pond was new, was information, was absorbed with the active attention of someone in an unfamiliar world. The second day is something else, something quieter. You have been on this road long enough that the act of watching has become more passive, more receptive. You are not cataloguing anymore. You are simply in the company of the landscape, and the landscape is simply passing. And the relationship between you and it is easier and less effortful than it was yesterday morning.
The English landscape of the 18th century is not, by any standard, a wilderness. It has been inhabited and managed and reshaped for so long by so many generations of hands and decisions that there is almost nowhere in lowland England where you cannot see the evidence of human purpose. The very shape of the hills has been modified, in some places by centuries of ploughing. The rivers have been diverted to serve mills. The woodlands are managed, coppiced on rotation, the shoots cut back every 7 or 12 years to produce poles and firewood and charcoal. The big oaks left to grow on the standards. The whole enterprise a kind of slow, patient agriculture of trees. The hedgerows are not wild growth, but planted boundaries, each one the record of an agricultural decision made by someone who is now long dead, but whose work you can still read in the landscape, the field shapes and road lines that they put in place, continuing to exist in the exact same configuration into which they were first made. This understanding that what you are looking at through the coach window is a text, a written thing, a record of human decisions accumulated over centuries, adds something to the watching. The farmer's field is not just a field. It is a story about land use and tenure and enclosure and the particular geology of this valley and the economics of sheep versus cattle versus wheat in this part of England in this decade. The church tower of the village you are passing through is not just a landmark. It is a record of the prosperity or poverty of the medieval community that built it, of the wool trade or the iron trade, or whatever it was that gave this place enough surplus wealth to build in stone to that height in that century. The road itself is a text about power and commerce and the need to connect places that needed connecting. Its course following a logic that is sometimes topographic, following the high ground, avoiding the marshes, and sometimes historic, following a route that was established 1,000 years ago for reasons that made sense then and became habit, and eventually became fact.
You are reading this text through a window the size of a large book at 8 miles an hour in the company of strangers for the second day. And it is in a way that you could not have predicted when you booked your seat 2 evenings ago. One of the more satisfying things you have done in a while.
A river again, wider than yesterday's crossings, spanned by a bridge of 3 arches, its parapet carrying a small stone carved into something that might be a face or might be weathering. Impossible to tell at this speed. The river below is high from last night's rain, its colour a rich dark brown, carrying leaves and the occasional branch. A heron stands at the edge of the near bank, with the particular frozen patience of a heron, grey, upright, entirely committed to its vigil, indifferent to the coach. It does not move as you pass. It has decided that the coach is not relevant to the matter at hand. And then heathland. The road crosses a stretch of common land, unenclosed, held in common by the manor or the parish, grazed by the animals of those who have the right of commonage. It is open ground, wider than the enclosed fields, and the sky comes down to meet it at a horizon that is less interrupted than the hedged landscape. The heath itself is low scrub, heather and gorse, both past their flowering, standing in the muted tones of autumn browns and greys, and the occasional persistent dark green of a young holly. There are sheep on the heath, more widely scattered than the sheep in the enclosed fields, moving with the unhurried drift of animals that have a great deal of ground to choose from and are taking their time about it. The wind has more room here, and you can feel it in the slight increase of sway as the coach crosses the open ground, the reduced shelter from the hedges making the whole vehicle aware, for a few miles, of the broader weather. Then the heathland ends, and the road drops down into a valley, and the world closes back in around the hedgerows, and the village at the bottom of the valley sends up its chimney smoke in the still air, and the sound of the wheels changes as the road's surface changes, and ahead of you, still a long way ahead, still more than an hour's travelling, but definitely there, definitely getting closer. The countryside begins to take on the slightly denser quality of a landscape that is approaching something significant. The fields are larger. The roads that branch from the main route are wider and more travelled. There is a town ahead, more than one town. The geography is acquiring the complexity of a place where many things converge. The second day's light is different from the first day's. The frost of the morning has given way to something slightly warmer. Not warm, not by any comfortable definition of the word, but the pale, thin warmth of a winter sun that has been making its low arc across the southern sky all day and is doing its best with what it has. The shadows are long and soft. The frost on the verge has melted into moisture, and the grass is dark with it, each blade catching the light differently than this morning's frozen version. The puddles in the road are not ice anymore, but they are also not nothing. They are obstacles for the wheels,
Small percussive events that the coachman navigates with the automatic expertise of someone who has stopped consciously registering them and incorporates them into his handling of the horses the way a swimmer incorporates the existence of water.
You have been on this road for the better part of 2 days. Your body has the knowledge of it now, the particular quality of coach stiffness that is different from any other kind of stiffness, distributed through the lower back and the shoulders, and the place at the back of the thighs where the seat edge has been making its case for hours. Your eyes are adjusted to the window view, to the pace of passing things, to the way the landscape moves at 8 miles an hour. You are, in the most specific sense, a traveller, not a person who happens to be travelling, but someone who has been made into a traveller by the road, who has absorbed the experience sufficiently that it has changed the texture of the day and of your thoughts about the day. And ahead, closer now, the destination waits, as it always does, as it always has. Part 17. Arrival. The approach to a town from the road in the 18th century is a process that happens in layers. The first layer is smoke. Long before you can see any building, long before the road widens or the traffic increases, you can smell and sometimes see the smoke of a large concentration of domestic fires. Coal, mostly, in the towns, giving the sky above the destination a slight brownish quality, a thickening of the air, a suggestion of the human presence below that is at once industrial and domestic, the combined exhalation of thousands of hearths and cook fires and workshop furnaces, all releasing into the same sky. The towns of 18th century England are, in this sense, visible from a distance that their actual buildings could not achieve. They announce themselves through their smoke long before they show their faces. The second layer is traffic. The road thickens. Other travellers appear. Not just coaches, not just the clean commerce of the main route, but the full complexity of a road that is approaching somewhere important. Wagons, heavily laden, their drivers sitting high on their loads or walking beside the horses. Carters with single horses and flat carts moving between the town and the surrounding villages. A drover on the outside edge of the road moving a small herd of cattle with a dog and a stick. The cattle moving in the particular unhurried crowd motion of animals being guided from behind. Their hooves loud on the packed road, their breath clouding, the dog working the edges with the low, quick movements of a trained animal who is wholly absorbed in the task. Pedestrians, too, the poor travellers, the people for whom even the outside fare of a coach is beyond reach, who walk their journeys as people have always walked their journeys, their bundles on their backs, their faces into the wind. The coach navigates all of this with a combination of the guard's horn and the coachman's voice, and the simple physical authority of a large vehicle moving with purpose, which tends to open paths
paths in the same way that moving water opens paths. The cattle part. The wagon pulls over with the elaborate, reluctant courtesy of a driver who resents having to move, but has done the calculation of what happens if he doesn't. The pedestrians, who have been walking on the crown of the road in the absence of a better surface, move to the verge without looking up. The third layer is buildings. The first buildings of the town are not the town's best face. They are the outlying cottages and yards and small industries that cluster around the road in the approaches to any settlement. A brickworks, a smithy, a small cluster of workers' cottages with damp-stained walls and low doors, a wheelwright's yard with new wheels and half-built wagon bodies and the smell of fresh-cut wood and hot metal. There is a sense of the town building itself, accumulating mass, adding density as the road progresses, the intervals between buildings growing shorter until the intervals disappear entirely and you are in a street, a proper street, with buildings on both sides that are continuous and close, and which present their fronts to you with the confidence of structures that know they are part of something organized.
The streets narrow as the coach goes deeper into the town. The noise increases. Voices, wheels, the particular urban cacophony of a place where many people and activities and vehicles share a limited space, and none of them is willing to yield any more than absolutely necessary. The coach slows. The coachman works the horses with more frequent instruction, navigating the junctions and the close passages with the watchful care of a man who understands exactly how wide his vehicle is, and exactly how much clearance is available, and is making the calculation continuously. The inn yard, when you reach it, opens off the main street through an archway that is, by this point in the journey, deeply familiar. You have passed through its twin at every coaching inn for 2 days, but this one is different, because on the other side of it is not the next section of road, but the end. The yard is busy. 2 coaches are already here. Ostlers move in their purposeful orbit. The sound of horses and harness and voices and cobblestones is the same sound it was yesterday morning in another town a long way away. But now it is the sound of arrival. The door opens. The footman holds it. You stand cautiously in the confined space, and the familiar stiffness of a long journey in a small space makes itself fully known in the act of rising. Your back, your knees, the particular soreness of the thighs. You accept these as the price of the journey, and step down onto the cobblestones of the inn yard, and stand for a moment in the cold air of the destination. Your legs know ground again. After 2 days of motion, the stillness of standing on fixed earth has a quality you did not know the stillness of earth possessed. It is very still. It is remarkably still. The ground does not rock. The ground does not sway. The ground does not
pitch slightly on corners or shudder over a rough section. The ground simply is beneath your feet, stable and patient and quiet. And the adjustment to this takes several minutes, during which you stand in the yard and breathe the cold air and feel your body reorienting to the world of the stationery. Hartley is already giving directions to the man who will handle his trunk. Mrs. Alderton stands near the coach door, looking at the yard with the expression of someone who has arrived where she was going, and is about to begin the other thing, the thing that the journey was always in service of, the sister's house, the ill husband, the days ahead that the journey was a preamble to. She catches your eye briefly and gives a nod. Not a warm nod, not a cold one, simply the nod of one traveller to another, acknowledging the shared passage from one place to another. The acknowledgement of two people who spent 2 days in a small room together and emerged intact on the other side. Then she turns and walks toward the inn door, and the yard swallows her in its business, and she is gone.
Edward stands for a moment in the middle of the yard with his bag, looking at the town around him and the coach that brought him here. And there is on his face an expression that you recognize, even though you have not seen it in exactly this form before. The expression of someone who has just done something that will always be when he looks back at it from the distance of years. One of the things that happened, one of the passages, one of the defining journeys, the ones that mark the beginning of something. He takes a breath. He picks up his bag. He walks out through the archway into the street. The coach, now empty, stands in the yard while the ostlers prepare it for whatever comes next. The horses are taken away. The luggage is unloaded. A woman with a broom addresses the interior straw. In an hour or two, different passengers will take these same seats, with these same leather straps and these same worn cushions, and set out on a different road toward a different destination. And they will carry with them exactly what you carried: the motion, the sound, the company of strangers, the slow and patient passage of the English countryside through a small rippled glass window. Part 18. The fading of the age. All of this ends. All of it ends within a generation, in the most dramatic possible way.
In 1830, the first passenger railway opens between Liverpool and Manchester. In 1838, the Great Western Railway begins running between London and Bristol in 4.5 hours, a journey that the best stagecoach of the previous era made in 16. By 1845, the railway network covers enough of England that the stagecoach routes are folding one by one, unable to compete on any measure that the travelling public cares about: speed, price, comfort, reliability. The coaching inns close, or reinvent themselves, or shrink to serve the diminished local traffic. The horse teams are dispersed, the coachmen retire, the guards put away their horns and their timepieces. The roads go quiet.
It happens fast in historical terms. The world that took generations to build, the turnpike trusts, the coaching inns spaced every 10 miles along the main routes, the great strings of stage horses maintained at stables all across England, the whole intricate, human-scaled infrastructure of the coaching age dismantles itself in roughly a decade. By 1850, what had been the most sophisticated and reliable passenger transport system in the world is essentially gone. The roads are still there. The inns are still there, those that survive. But the coaches, the horses, the guards with their horns, they are gone, reduced to a few nostalgic exceptions and the memory of people old enough to have used them.
There are people alive in 1850 who remember the coaching age clearly, who remember the first time they took a stagecoach as a child, the smell of the horses, the sound of the horn at the toll gate, the warmth of the inn parlour after a winter day's travel. They are the last people who know it from the inside, from lived experience, from the body's memory. After them, it is only text, only records, only the descriptions of journalists and diarists and novelists who tried to capture the experience of a world they suspected was already vanishing as they wrote. Charles Dickens wrote about coaches. He loved them, or loved the idea of them. The Christmas scenes in Pickwick Papers, the great nostalgic swirl of snowy inns and hot punch and jolly coachmen, are Dickens writing about a world he knew just well enough to feel its loss when it went. The Pickwick Papers was published in 1836, precisely at the moment when the railways were beginning to make the coaching age obsolete. It is a book about a world in the process of vanishing, though Dickens was writing it as a comedy, and perhaps did not know quite what he was also doing. The inns that served the coaches became, for a generation or two, somewhat melancholy places. Their yards were empty. Their stabling was excessive for the traffic they now received. Their landlords found themselves presiding over establishments built for a trade that no longer existed in the form it had been built for. Some converted to other purposes. Some declined slowly and sold off their furniture and fittings piece by piece. Some became the village pubs that survive today in English market towns, their archways preserved, their yards turned into car parks, their old staging signs still legible if you know how to read them. And the roads themselves, the turnpike trusts that built and maintained the great coaching roads of England, lost their revenue as the traffic moved to rail, and they in turn declined and were eventually dissolved, their roads absorbed into the public highway network. The roads the coachmen drove are still there, in most cases, under different surfaces, carrying different vehicles at incomparably greater speeds, connecting the same towns and villages that they connected in the 18th century. The geography is unchanged. The distance between London and Bath is still the same distance it always was. It is only the time that is different. But there is something that was lost, and the people who lost it knew it, and wrote about it in the language of the newly bereaved. The coaching age was not only a method of travel, It was a pace of life. It was a relationship with distance and with time that the railways dissolved entirely and permanently. At 8 miles an hour, the world between one place and another is real. It has texture. It has duration. It can be experienced and witnessed and considered. At 60 miles an hour, it is a blur. At the speed of a modern motorway, it is an abstraction. The people who rode the stagecoaches in their final years and then boarded trains for the first time experienced this change in a way that we, who have only ever known speed, cannot fully imagine. They described it variously as exhilarating and terrifying and deeply strange. They described looking out of train windows and not being able to see anything, the landscape moving too fast to register. They described the towns passing through in minutes that had previously taken hours, and feeling in that compression a kind of vertigo, as if time itself had been interfered with. There is a melancholy in this that does not require you to be a reactionary or a romantic to feel. The stagecoach age was not gentle. It was cold and slow and uncomfortable and dangerous, and the railways that replaced it were, by any material measure, a vast improvement in the lives of people who needed to travel. But something was also genuinely lost. A relationship with the land between places. A pace at which the journey had its own existence, rather than being merely the gap between departure and arrival. A world in which you could hear the wind and smell the rain and watch the heron on the riverbank and have time, all the time, to notice. Tonight, on this script, on this particular slow and patient journey through the history of a coach and a road and a world that existed before the age of speed, we have had that time. We have moved at the right pace. We have passed through the toll gates and stopped at the coaching inns and sat with our fellow passengers in the warmth of a body that is rocking gently towards its destination. And the miles have gone by at 8 miles an hour, and the world outside the window has been visible and real and detailed and slow. And perhaps that pace, that particular slow pace, is the pace at which the sleeping mind finds its rest. The road goes on. Outside the window, in the dark, England is still there. The hedgerows, the fields, the rivers, the farms with their morning smoke not yet started. The coaching inn somewhere ahead, with its archway and its warmth and its fire and its beds. The horses keeping their steady rhythm, their breath clouding in the cold air, their feet finding the road in the dark with the certainty of creatures who know where they are going and are content with the going. The guard's horn sounds somewhere ahead, announcing the approach to another toll gate, another brief, bright moment in the dark. And then the gate rises, and the darkness closes back in, and the road goes on, and the coach rocks, and the harness creaks, and the wheels hold their low, sustained note against the road.
And the sound of the journey is the sound of a world that is resting and moving simultaneously, going somewhere slowly, taking its time. The miles unspool, the night deepens, the horses keep their pace. And if you are still listening, if the road has been good to you tonight, if the motion and the warmth and the sound of it have carried you to the edge of wherever you are going, then let yourself go there now. Let the last miles go by without watching them. Let the voice of the journey fade into the background where it belongs, a constant reassurance rather than an event, the sound of the world doing what it does while you rest.
The coaching inn is always ahead. The fire is always burning. The bed is always made. The blanket turned back. The candle on the table, with enough left in it to see you to sleep, and no further. The sound of the inn settling around you in the night, the horses in their stalls, the last voices in the tap room, the creak of the sign above the door in the wind, is not strange anymore. It is home. Every stopping place is home for the night. Sleep now. The journey will continue in the morning. It always does. If this slow journey through history helped you find your rest tonight, a like and a subscription to Hi-O, boring history for sleep, means the world to a very small channel that has been working very hard for a very long time. Tell me in the comments where you are in the world, and what time it is, and whether the road was good to you. I read every one.